are group 4, and we will be conducting a genuine debate this morning, discussing our topic, which has been very controversial amongst us. Plato once said that there are 4 parts that perfectly fit into the constructs of wisdom. First, he said there is wisdom, the principle of doing things right. Secondly, there should be the inclusion of justice, and this form of equality or justice should be apparent in public or in private. Third, wisdom must embody fortitude, never evading but standing firm in the face of it. And finally, says Plato, there is temperance, which requires subduing desires and living in moderation. Our group is evaluating the thesis question, are racial implications the catalyst of the APS cheating scandal? We apply Plato's constructs and those of other timeless philosophers, scholars, academicians, theologians, as well as the analysis of authors and journalists around this timely question. We will begin first with about a minute commentary from each of our panelists. I'm Reverend Lily Shaw, and to my right is Reverend Robin Burdett. To my left is Reverend Deborah Kilpatrick and also Reverend Edward Burt. We will start with Reverend Robin Burnett, who will give us a minute overview on her position on this thesis question.
Well, as a civil rights leader beginning a nonviolent campaign, like my brother, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I have collected the facts from media and from one of the defendants herself to determine whether injustices were alive. And I've also negotiated with these facts, and I've self-purified to remove any ungodly biases. And I'm continuing through the process of direct action. And with these 4 basic steps, it has been determined that we must use root cause analysis. When I say that, white supremacist Governor Sonny Perdue and his paternalistic injustice with the late Superintendent Beverly Hall caused a communicable pathogenic infestation of the psyche of the other educators who were automatically threatened with the justice within the Atlanta public schools as a whole. And briefly, it remains that unjust treatment of Negroes in the courts as they continually use the difference principle of distributive justice is a notorious reality. So yes, racism within Georgia's political system and racism within the judicial system were the catalyst for the APS cheating scandal.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call on Reverend Burt next, if you will give me your commentary and position on the thesis question.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. First of all, let me say that the issue that we're dealing with is a very complicated issue. And so because of its complications, what we have a tendency to do sometimes is to oversimplify or generalize. With that saying, I don't believe that racial implications are the catalyst for the APS cheating scandal. I believe that our ethical issue for me is how one responds to inequalities in the educational system. I believe that these inequalities in the educational system has led some to do some things that they would not normally do. I would argue that there are some biases that these teachers, administrators, and Beverly Hall had that came to play as a result of this cheating scandal.
Okay. Thank you for that. And now, Reverend Patrick, if you'll share with us your position.
Hey, I say let's save the race card for later. The teachers and the administrators involved in the cheating scandal were guilty based on their choices or moral reasoning. The guilty teachers, in their pursuit for happiness, practiced paternalism and were in no way altruistic in nature. I really don't see racial implications being a catalyst for the APS scandal, but I agree with Immanuel Kant's statement that only by behaving rationally do we show ourselves to be anonymous beings in control of the passions and appetites that might lead us to act against our better judgment.
I'm going to go first to Reverend Burt. Reverend Burt, we talked about the moral reasoning for all parties in this situation. Where is the moral reasoning for those who are, if you will, elevated above these educators in this scenario? Where is the moral compass for that body?
That's an excellent question, and one that I think we need to consider. I don't think we have considered. This issue has not it just didn't come up in 2015 or 2009. This issue goes all the way back to 1964 when Lyndon Baines Johnson enacted an educational act, Title I, that enabled areas that were poverty-ridden to have educational money, and they call it Title I. Now what we're starting to see is there are those who are trying to get their hands on that Title I money because it has been attributed for poverty-ridden areas. And so the educational system, with their standardized testing, with the conglomeration or the connectedness of big business and people like Bill and Melinda Gates, as they come in and try to put their hands on that money and then funnel that money through charter schools, okay? It acts in the government's best interest to publicly turn public education upside down. And I think that's problematic for us when we continue to say race is the issue, when we see that there are these other factors, specifically class, because it's not just about race. They're trying to get all the money. They don't want just the black folks' money. They want all money in the system.
I'm gonna defer, thank you for that. I'm gonna defer to you next and ask, as it relates to class, your argument would substantiate that this is not necessarily class related, and I was thinking about a comment, actually a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. It says, "Law and order exists for the purpose of establishing justice, and when they fail in this purpose, they become the dangerously structured dams that block the flow of social progress." Do you think that in this particular situation that law and justice have prevailed altogether? Do you think that this is merely a social dilemma, or does this go significantly deeper in the area of race?
I would say significantly deeper in the area of race. But hear me out, I do know that race is only a social construct. I understand that the race does not exist in all cultures, but a race is alive and well. Racism is alive and well, and is literally mentally and physically destructive and homicidal in this United States of America. And if we want to move into justice, if we talk about distributive justice, there is something within distributive justice called the difference principle. And with the difference principle, which was practiced with this particular case, people are treated equally unless reasons for inequality exist. And the reason for the inequality that I say exists within this case is they were black. In Illinois, Bailey Harold, Lake County, Nicole Jacobson, white woman, admitted to guilt for molesting a child within the middle school system, and she was only given probation. In Andalusia, Alabama, white man admitted to being guilty of molesting a 6-month-old child. Probation was the only thing that he was given. In the Atlanta public school system, these individuals, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, mere teachers were treated like monsters. That's why I say, not class, but race.
I'm sure you have something to chime in on here and say, but I'm gonna defer to you, Reverend Kilpatrick. You said paternalistic, that this process, the policy or practice on the part of people in positions of authority of restricting the freedom and responsibilities of those subordinate to them in this an environment that should be altruistic. that there was a paternalistic element in this. So would you in any way agree with what Reverend Burnett is saying?
No, well, I strongly believe that school teachers are morally obligated to take care, to be the caretakers for our children in the classrooms. The great philosophers and students of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle would agree with the statements of Thomas Aquinas, that a teacher is a role model for the pupil. And that is important, that the teacher be a person of good character, as the teacher inevitably serves as an exemplar for students. I think the Atlanta public school teachers, they did take the role of the oppressor and not think about the children.
And I understand your position there, and I'm not differing with you at all, but playing devil's advocate, Thomas Aquinas also said justice is in subjects as well as in rulers. So again, going back to the initial question that we had early on, there is a system that exists over school teachers and administrators in this environment. And obviously they are presiding over the children. So what of the constructs then? Does that fly out the window in the face of dealing with persons at a higher level?
The children are the silent, innocent victims. They had no say in this, none whatsoever.
Let me say
I'm not
this.
dismissing that.
No, let me say this.
Yes.
King in his letter from a Birmingham jail says any law that degrades human personality is unjust. Any law that degrades human personality is unjust. And any law that